Hey there everyone, Jeremy Gerard from Mythic Customs here with one of my short customizing tutorial videos. Today's video is going to focus on one specific figure, and that is the green bone skeleton known as Scaphoid. So Scaphoid was originally released in the Covenant of Shadow wave, which is one of the older waves. That was actually the third wave that was ever released. You had Mythic Legions 1.0, then you had the 1.5 wave, and then Covenant of Shadow was originally called like 1.75 because that was before the horsemen really started giving names to the waves. But once that wave was fully revealed, it was called Covenant of Shadow. And originally, the green bone skeleton was actually known as Poison Skeleton. That was kind of the working name before we got an actual name for the character. Now, if you've been following Mythic Legions, you know that Scaphoid is one of the figures that was selected by the fans for inclusion in the new All-Stars 4 wave. So he is going to be available along with the other winners and a couple surprises in the Mythic Legions All-Stars 4 series, which means that this figure, which is fairly hard to find today, is now going to be fairly readily available. Fans are going to get another shot at him just like they do with all of the All-Stars. That's great news because Scaphoid is a really cool figure as is, and he's really, really fun to customize. So what I'm hoping to do today is show you some of the ways that I've used Scaphoid for one specific series of customs I did that I called my Ghosts of Caramoor. Hopefully you'll see some of the ways that I've used the figure. They're not complicated customs, and maybe that will start to get you thinking of ways you can use this figure. It's perfect timing because as I record this video, the pre-order for All-Stars 4 is open, so maybe this will just make you think about picking up a few extras as part of that pre-order to customize into some cool new characters. So Scaphoid himself is an interesting character. He's actually one of the figures that I was not super excited about when I first saw him. When I first saw him in the Mythic Legions Covenant of Shadow line, I didn't really get it. Remember, again, this was really, really early. All of the skeletons we had at that point were all normal bone colored except for Clavian, the red skeleton. And I really didn't care for Clavian that much at first either. Now, retroactively, I've started to really appreciate those skeletons with different colored bones. For instance, that red-boned Clavian, I now use as a Fury skeleton, putting it alongside my Fury Orcs and the other Fury clan type characters I've customized. The blue-boned Keltis, I've actually turned into like an ice skeleton. And here we're looking at the green bone Scaphoid, and I've actually turned those into more of a ghostly type character. So a while back, I got a whole bunch of Scaphoid figures as part of a lot I purchased, and I already had one on display, but I had all these extras, and I said, well, what am I going to do with these? And I got the idea to do something similar to what you see in Lord of the Rings Return of the King. So when Aragorn, Legolas, and Gimli go and they enlist all of the ghosts underneath the mountain to their cause, I thought that that would be really fun to build a bunch of customs that are ghostly in that type of way. So let's look at the Scaphoid figure. I have one right here on the floor. Grab him. Pull him apart. I actually have a separate head on him that I'm going to show you in a minute. But this is pretty much what the figure looks like to begin with. So it looks like this character right here. Really, really cool looking figure. He's got this purple tabard, he's got the green bones, and he's got this kind of like golden old looking armor. It's a really nice paint scheme they've used on it. I like that a lot. That's one of the things that I think a lot of people should be aware of is just out of the box, he's a really great looking figure, but the armor color and the tabard color, the tunic color, those are fairly unique for the line as well. So you can do some really cool things just with those. If you don't like the paint, just being able to kit bash these together and use that torso, use that loin piece and that purple color. There are no other purples in the line. Goes great with vampires. You can mix that in with Bard Valagar or some of the other Vampire 1.0 style figures, and you've got a really nice new look there. In aesthetically, it works really, really well because those characters are black and purple also. The armor as well, really cool armor color. You can use these on a variety of different types of characters, and just they've got a nice weathered, kind of worn look to them. Really, really cool looking. So love the figure, but when I first saw it, like I said, wasn't a huge fan until I got the idea to do these Ghosts of Caramoor. So if you grab this figure, here's some things you can do. Now, first off, you should know it comes with 2 heads, which is pretty cool. The 2 original skeleton heads that were released, there was the standard skeleton head, like what we found on the Skeleton Legion builder, that has a fixed jaw. Then it's got this head, which I have on here, which has got the movable jaw. So the movable jaw was originally available. We first saw it on the Malleus figure. It's come on a couple other figures as well since then, certainly, but it also came on Scaphoid. So right out of the box, you're going to get 2 skeleton heads. Now, they do look pretty similar with the exception of the movable jaw, so you're not going to get a lot of variety there. But there are some really cool things you can do, even if you just want to swap heads. So I'm going to show you some examples. These are some of the figures that I built for my Ghosts of Caramoor line. So the first thing I'm going to show you is I'm going to show you the king type character that I did for the Ghosts of Caramoor. Now, this uses a head from the Masters of the Universe Classics Demo Man figure. Very early on in my customizing of Mythic Legions, I used a lot of Masters of the Universe Classics figures, mainly because it was what was available. This was a time before we had all the 3D companies, and certainly before the Mythic Legions line itself was as expansive as it is today. So looking for other types of parts, other types of heads that worked aesthetically, it was really easy to land on I should say Masters of the Universe Classics, because Masters Classics were also sculpted by Four Horsemen Studios, so they had a similar aesthetic. This particular head here from Demo Man, the green color of that head is a perfect match for the green bones that you find on Scaphoid. So this was a really easy, kind of addition to make. And you can see I've got a couple different looks here. I've also, because this is the king of my ghosts, I've used a crown on him, and that is just the golden crown from the Dwarf King Gromden Ironjaw, but it just pops right on, or you can pop it off if you want to have the standard look of the Demo Man head. Now, Masters of the Universe Classics head do not fit on Mythic Legions bodies or neck posts by default. If you check back later in my account here, some of my past videos, some of my past short customizing tutorial videos, you'll find one about dremeling heads, adding new heads. That's what you're going to want to do here. So if you pop the head off on Scaphoid, he's got that skeleton neck post. What you're going to do is when you get the Demo Man head, you're going to need to use a Dremel to kind of widen that hole underneath the head. That's what you're going to want to do. Again, watch that video. I'm not going to go into crazy detail here, but once you put that on, you get a really, really cool look. Again, pop that crown on there. Super easy way, perfect paint match. All you've got to do, if you can grab one of these heads, give it a little bit of a Dremel, and it fits wonderfully well on this figure. Other things you can do, let's look at another example. So I said that it came with 2 different skeleton heads, and at the time, those were the only skeleton heads we had. But we now have other skeleton heads, namely the Brother Mandibulus head. So one of the things I did for my Ghosts of Caramoor, again, I wanted to have like a nice little team of ghosts here, was I took a Brother Mandibulus head and I changed the paint scheme on it to match Scaphoid. Now, in this particular case, and as you're going to see throughout these figures, I've also changed the different armor that they have, whether it's the shoulder armor, whether it's the waist armor, used belts in different ways. Again, you can check my video from a few weeks ago about different ways to use belts on your figures for some ideas there. But what I wanted to do was create a series of characters that had something in common, certainly the green bones, but they had some uniqueness about them. So that's what I did here with the Brother Mandibulus. And it's also a great figure because You can get a couple different looks even just by having the visor up or down. But all I really did here was paint that skeleton face black and then do a little bit of dry brushing with some greens that match, like greens and yellows that match the colors here. I don't have the exact paint colors that I used on hand because I quite frankly did these, some time ago. But the nice thing is there's definitely some color variety on the Scaphoid figure. So by playing around with some greens and yellows, mixing them together, doing some dry brushing, slowly putting that on, I think you can get a really nice color match to the Scaphoid bones. So there's another idea. So another thing that I did was just mess around with the existing heads that we had. So again, I said that it came with the two heads, one that has the movable jaw. Super easy thing here. All I did was I removed that bottom jaw. So by removing that bottom jaw, it totally changes the profile of the way that head looks. It actually looks a little small when you remove the jaw, to be honest with you. So by making sure that I used the neck collar piece here, that minimizes it. And in this particular case, I also put a helmet on. This is just a rubber style helmet from a Lord of the Rings figures. I love to use Lord of the Rings figures in my customs. I find that the parts are very, very interchangeable. The arrows that you see in his quiver, those are also from Lord of the Rings here, while that shoulder armor is just something that I had in my fodder bins. Once again, mixing and matching. But the big change here is just pulling that jaw off, adding a little bit of a helmet onto that head here to change the look of the figure. Super, super easy to do, but really cheap kind of LBC Lazy Boy customizer way to get another look. Speaking of helmets, here's another thing that I did, actually using a 2.0 skeleton head. So the 2.0 skeleton heads are a little small to fit on the 1.0 bodies. But using the same trick of a Dremel that I used on the Masters of the Universe head, you can actually Dremel that skeleton 2.0 style head to fit on this 1.0 body. This is a figure that I also messed around with the armor. You can see in that middle photo there, the shoulder armor that he has. I've actually used an X-Acto blade to trim that armor to change the way it looks. I actually did a video about that the week prior to posting this one. Last week I did a video all about how to modify heads and modify, armor to get some different looks. And those are some principles that I've used on the Ghosts of Caramoor line here. So you can see that cut of the armor, dremeling of the head, and then that Spartan or Mercurian style helmet he has, that is actually just from a WWE Create a Superstar set. Super easy. It's very rubbery material, so it fits right on top of that head. And the nice thing is, even though the head's a little small for the body, when you add the helmet on top of it, it totally gets it to the size that works well for this figure. So moving right along, I got two more ideas to show you. Speaking of modifying heads, here's one that I modified pretty significantly to create a whole new head for this character. So this is something I've done a few times where what I did is that upper part of the helmet here is it's actually from a head that's pretty common. We first saw it on like the Barbarian, builder pack, on Ornn Steelhide, on Bother Shadowhorn, and we've seen it a number of times since then. Cavern Dwarf has it. It's basically that helmeted head, and there's a beard that is the lower part of it. Well, the thing is, that beard is actually a separate piece. It's not all one mold. It's two separate pieces. There's the helmet part, and there's the beard. The beard is glued in place, and while it's not meant to be removed, it's not very difficult to pop it out. Some of the heads actually pop out very, very easily. The beard just pulls right out. Others, you got to heat it up and maybe work at it a little bit. But once you do that, you end up with just that top helmet piece. So what I did here was I took another Scaphoid head, and this was the one with the fixed jaw. I heated that head up so it was nice and pliable. The plastic was soft, and I used an X-Acto blade with a very, very sharp blade, a brand new blade, and I cut the jaw right at the point where I felt it would make sense, where if that skeleton was wearing this helmet on his head, that jaw would be coming out the bottom. cut it apart, glued it together. I still had the actual part of the neck port that clicked the head hole that goes onto the neck ball. That's actually part of the helmet itself. So that still attaches, no problem at all. It retains full articulation, and you get a very different looking skeleton head here. So the last one I'm going to look at, this is one that admittedly is going to be a little hard to do because it uses a head that's really hard to find. Actually, certainly much more difficult to find than Scaphoid, even before Scaphoid was added to the All-Stars 4-wave. And that is using a Keltis head. So this Keltis head here, I mentioned at the start of this video that the blue-boned Keltis, I used that as like an ice skeleton type character. So because I used Keltis as an ice skeleton, I used the blue skeleton head that came with it. So I had this head left over. And what's interesting is the yellow on Keltis's face is actually a really good match once again for the yellow bones of Scaphoid. So just by adding some armor to him, I used, a cape from an old Ultima Online figure. I used a sword from Motu Classics. I used a lower skirt here from Lord of the Rings. Variety of different parts, as you can see, that I'm combining for this creation. But ultimately, the big addition is that Keltis head. I've seen a number of people ask if the yellow on Keltis's face matches the bones of Scaphoid. And while it's not exact, it is actually really close because the head is, separated from the arms. The arms are the closest bone part to it. They're separated by the neck collar armor and, the shoulder armor and stuff. They're not touching. They're not side by side touching. A slight variance in color is one that you don't actually notice all that much. So those are just some ideas that I've used. And again, this was a while ago. I'm certain that when I get the new Scaphoid figures in, I'm going to have new ideas. I'll probably add to my Ghosts of Caramoor, add other characters in there. There's certainly third-party companies that have now done skeleton heads that you could certainly paint those in Scaphoid colors as well to create additional versions of this character. So that would be my suggestion. If you're looking at the Scaphoid figure and you're saying, wow, he's so unique, because that is one of the things I've heard is he's such a unique character with those green bones, unlike something like, a regular bone skeleton or a green-skinned orc that you can imagine building out legions of them. Scaphoid seems so specific, but here's an idea that I wanted to present to you to not think about him as a poison skeleton or a sorcerer type skeleton, which is what his bio says he is, but to maybe think about him as a ghost. Change up his head a little bit, and you can have this whole cool ghostly army like I have for my Ghosts of Caramoor. So hopefully this video helped kind of inspire some ideas, get you thinking of ways you can use Scaphoid or maybe some of your other skeletons. If you enjoy videos like this, please let me know. Give the video a like. If you have any questions, hit me up in the comments. And most importantly, if you haven't subscribed already to the channel, please do so. Helps me out immensely when I build my subscriber count, and it will help you be notified when videos like this go live. Until next time, I can't wait to see what you make. Thanks for tuning in.